Lesson 2.7. Test yourself. In Module 2, you learned how to create a 3D model and how to create drawings from it. Try to create the following model and drawings using the skills and techniques that you learned in Session 2. When you look at this model, you might think that you don't know enough to create it. But if you remember what you've learned in Module 2, you'll also learn that you can break up complex objects into simple parts and use those. Look at the stairs, for example, 3 simple extrusions. If you look at the planters, you might remember that you can use subtract solid to take one object away from the other. The chairs and table, for example, simple extruded objects. And the fireplace, while it looks really complex, is actually very simple if you break it down into simple chunks. The flue, of course, is just a simple extrusion. The firebox itself is a simple extrusion with something taken away from it. If you create an extrusion for the hearth, you can subtract that from the firebox, leaving behind your fireplace. The addition of the light makes a huge difference to this object. I would really like you to try this before you watch this movie. So if you haven't tried creating this yet, please do it and then come back and watch this movie. So here we have the plan. We've used viewports to create the plan, the front and the left view, and we've created a 3D viewport with the light showing for the rendered view. I'll just zoom in so that you can see it. So there's my rendered view. You might be looking at this thinking, how hard could this be to make? Well, actually, I think it's reasonably easy. We've got some simple extrusions for the floor, simple extrusions for the steps, 2 simple extrusions here, subtract one from the other to make the planter. The chair's really made from simple extrusions, some straight rectangles, a rectangle for the back, a rectangle for the seat. The table is similar, it's just a straight rectangle with some rectangular legs. The fireplace, there's a firebox here which is a simple rectangle extruded. Then I created a shape for the hearth, I subtracted solid from that, and the flue is just a simple extrusion. Here's my design layer showing all the parts. So I can delete those, and just because I do something one way doesn't make it the only way that you could have done it. So I'm going to select everything and delete it. If I go back to a top plan view, I could start by creating a simple rectangle. Now if I remember correctly, it was a 3.5 by 3.5 meter square. Now the actual sizes don't matter for this exercise. The previous exercise, I really wanted you to draw stuff exactly the right size. For this exercise, I really don't mind whether you make up your own design and use your own dimensions. So this is about 10 feet or 3 meters by the same amount, 10 feet or 3 meters. Okay, and so now it's in the middle. Now I tried to get it right in the middle. It looks like I missed a little bit, so I'm just going to change those dimensions so that the center of my rectangle is right in the middle at 0, 0. Then I can go to Model on the menu bar and I can choose Extrude. And extrude by 900 millimeters. Now I need to extrude this base part. Now I could extrude it by say 900 millimeters, but actually I think in order to make the mathematics easy, I'm going to make it 800 millimeters, because each of my steps is then going to be a 200 millimeter step. I could use this method maybe, or that one, or I can double click on my rectangle and I can create some steps. You might remember the steps were about 14 inches, 350 millimeters, and the height was about 3 meters minus, you might remember, minus the 2 planters each side. Well, they were about 900 millimeters or about 18 inches each, so minus 900 millimeters. Don't forget the minus sign, and I'm going to set my insertion point to there. Position it next, click, okay, and then I can stick one of those there. So that's my first rectangle, which I could extrude. But remember, I want to have another rectangle which is about the same size, but maybe twice as long as that. So this one would be 700 millimeters. And remember, the minus 700 or 28 inches. And then another one from here, which would be 3 times. So it's 3 times 350 millimeters, or 3 times 14 inches you could put in there. And if you forget the minus, of course, it goes the wrong way. So let's just go back and put the minus in so that it goes the correct way. So I've got that first one. If I then go to model and I choose extrude, it'll go up. So let's change now to a 3D view. This is my first rectangle, and because I've only just created it, I could actually click and drag that up. That wants to come up about 200 millimeters, which is about 8 inches. Enter once, enter again. If I hold the B key down and go to my selection tool, I can select the next one, that rectangle. Let's extrude that one, and we'll do it the same amount, but we'll need to lift it up in the air. So modify, so model on the menu bar, extrude, and this is 200 millimeters extrusion, and we need to lift that up, bottom Z 200. So it's 8 inches high, and it's also 8 inches off the ground. Hold down the B key, we need that last rectangle. Model on the menu bar again, extrude, and the same amount, but this time 400 millimeters, or 16 inches. So there are my 3 steps. I've got the planter. Remember, we've got a planter at the corner. So let's start here. Make sure your automatic working plane is working. So that's 450 millimeters, about 18 inches. So tab, minus 450. So that would be minus 18 inches. Enter once, enter again. When we come back to that, we can click and we can pull that up by the same amount, 18 inches. What about now? What should we do this time? Don't forget you can change your rectangle tool mode. So we could find the center of that. We could come out here, find the size that we want, click, and we must have learnt this already, where we can click and drag that down, hold down the Alt key, and click once. And that subtracts one from the other. I'm going to go back to a top plan view. So there's my planter. I can copy that, and one of the tricks I use a lot is to drag and then put my finger on the Control or the Option key, and if I hold the Shift key down at the same time, it constrains that, so it's horizontal. Select them both, grab them from this corner here, end point, pull those down, the Control or the Option key, that makes a copy, and I've now got my 4 planters. What about making our fireplace? Double click on our rectangle tool. So our width was about 1200, 4 feet wide. The height was about 500 millimeters, about, how would that be, 20 inches, I guess. Position it next, click, there, okay, and find the midpoint. So our fireplace needs to be a bit deeper than that. So let's add an additional 250 millimeters or an additional 10 inches. And there it is. Then we can extrude that. Now it might be easier if we change to a 3D view like this. I'm just using my flyover tool. If we just pulled that up to a specific height. So maybe that's not bad. That's the top of that planter, but that's not enough. We need to have it a bit higher than that, probably another 600 millimeters or another 24 inches. And we can have a look at that again, and that's looking much better. I'm going to go back to my rectangle tool, this time rectangle from midpoint. So that's the start of my hearth, and we're going to go to that point there. If I change my view, remember I can pull that through, and then I can put my finger on the Alt key and I can click. And it takes away that hearth from my firebox. All I need to do now is to put the chimney on top, or the flue on top. I'm going to use my circle by diameter, and make sure you're in the automatic working plane before you start. So let's just go to automatic, and we're going to go there to there, and then I can grab hold of that, pull that straight up, and there's my chimney. So a lot of this is very straightforward. I'm not going to build the chairs, but you can get the drift. A lot of this is very straightforward to build that exercise. So go ahead, finish that exercise, do practice please, do build the table, do build the chairs. We're just building simple rectangles at this stage. If you want to color them, by all means, give them colors. We're not going to talk about textures in this course, but if you'd prefer to give those a color, go ahead and give them some color, because it really helps the design when you color the objects. Module 2 Review. In this module, you learned how to create simple 3D models, you learned how to control working planes, you learned how to control 3D viewing, you learned how to create drawings from a 3D model, you learned how to place and edit a simple light, and you learned how to control multiple viewing planes.